Welcome to the latest edition of Under the Brown Jacket, featuring me, Jason Collier. You can follow me on Twitter at Boconuts. Well, thanks for joining me again. Today I've got a very special guest, Jeff Reedy, the CEO of Scale Computing, one of my lifelong friends here. We've been doing companies together for quite some time. You can actually follow him on Twitter as well at McStartup.
That's right, McStartup.
So,
or MC Startup, as some people have
MC
said. But it's
Startup.
really supposed to be McStartup.
Yeah, you know, because he's
McDonald's,
like,
love McDonald's.
He's hip and cool. He's like MC.
Right.
That's why. That's why. So today we're actually going to talk about RFC 1925's fundamental truth number 11. So truth number 11 is every old idea will be proposed again with a different name and a different presentation, regardless of whether it works. So there are a couple of things, like since we started Scale Computing, there's a few things that, you know, have evolved in the industry. One of the ones that we talk about quite a bit is cloud computing, and basically how, you know, when you're talking about things that have been reinvented and called a different name, we instantly thought basically mainframes and time sharing as one of those specific examples.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about the cloud, right, and you know, what are the advantages of the cloud, and it's, you know, cost and complexity, right? I mean, it's too expensive to build your own modern infrastructure. It's very complicated, and so, you know, the cloud is a way to kind of outsource everything, right?
Yep.
And have it all out there.
And you used to think, like, so, and primarily what time sharing was, you know, back in the old days when they're selling time sharing, it's basically you're renting compute time on a very expensive mainframe that somebody else owned. So, you know, really a lot of that evolution of how the cloud came, you know, you're effectively renting the space to basically use, and, you know, it used to be called, you know, another thing they always called it was like utility computing. I mean, out of the time sharing, it kind of became known as this utility computing piece. And, you know, I think not just that. I mean, we got kind of the cloud computing and time sharing, but one of the other things we see is basically reinvented. It creates these cyclical patterns, you know. Another one that you related to that is, you know, like virtualization in the mainframe as well.
Yeah, I mean, even when we first started Scale Computing, right, and we were whiteboarding kind of what our vision was for what the industry now calls hyperconvergence. But at the time, we didn't have a name for it, right? But we were just talking about bringing the concepts of servers and storage and virtualization all back together and having it highly available and fault tolerant. And we drew it up. We're like, well, basically, dude, that's a mainframe, right? Except
exactly.
that this time it's on x86 gear, and it's easy to use, and it's a whole lot less expensive. But, you know, I mean, why was there time sharing on, you know, those mainframes? Because mainframes were complicated and expensive, right?
Yep.
Why is there cloud computing? Because running your own infrastructure can be complicated and expensive. So, you know, what we're trying to do here is we bring that concept, the affordability and the simplicity that you know, x86 servers brought compared to the mainframe, but now bring it into that highly available mainframe type architecture.
Yeah, so what you're really looking at too, when you take and consider that, it's kind of the commoditization of a lot of the ideas that came out of the mainframe. I mean, that was just expensive iron that you had to buy, but using those commodity components now, it's effectively the commoditization of a lot of those mainframe components.
Yeah, I mean, and, you know, I mean, the fact is that even when, you know, I think it's easy to look back and think that, like, well, obviously everybody should go to distributed computing when that change happened. But in reality, right, there were a lot of great things about the mainframe. And you could reach in and rip a motherboard out and the thing kept running, right?
Yes,
I mean, that's pretty awesome.
It was highly available.
Yeah, you know, I mean, that doesn't happen on the x86. But now with the virtualization technology, which of course has its roots actually back in the mainframe days, and you know, applying that into clustering and all that sort of thing, you get some of that cool functionality back again. And, you know, if you can deliver that in a way that's easy, you know, you perhaps forego some of the need to do the cloud / time sharing thing, right?
Yep. No, that's it's good stuff. It's interesting where this is going. So now as a little segue to that, we recently did, you know, kind of our all hands meeting where we had, you know, everybody together, you know, in the company as basically kind of a kickoff for the new year. And one of the things, interesting slides that you brought up was effectively the predicted growth in this hyperconvergence market, and then you kind of compared that to, you know, the cyclical things that we've seen in the market of effectively the decline of the mainframe going into the client server side market, and now we're seeing the client server market kind of cycle back into that mainframe, and there were some pretty interesting numbers and statistics on that.
Yeah, I mean, it was really almost uncanny, right?
Yes.
And so, Wikibon and some others have forecast that convergence in what they refer to as single SKU, right? So a single solution that runs everything, similar to what we do at scale. Over the next 6 years would have something like a 62% annual growth rate, right? I mean, pretty substantial. Right now we're starting with a small number, right? So pretty substantial. And compared to traditional server infrastructure that would have about a 4 or 5% growth rate. Right. So I went back and looked, and I was trying to find, well, when, it's hard to pinpoint when was the x86 server invented, right? Because obviously you had PCs long before you were using them as servers. But in some research, I mean, it appears that Compaq is the one credited around 1990 or so, and that as an IT guy, right? I mean, that felt about right when you had modern networking. I mean, you weren't using LAN-tastic or something, right? I mean,
Novell was the the big
it's
piece,
sort of like you had this, and the internet was right around the corner, and all that felt about right. And so I looked at what was the actual growth rate of the x86 server business from 1990 to 1996. 64% annual growth rate, right? It was crazy. And then at the same time, what was the growth of mainframes over that period of time? 4.5%, right? I mean, it's exactly the same thing. So, these trends are certainly cyclical, and I would suppose that 30 years from now we'll be somehow moving away from converged infrastructure and back into some kind of distributed computing, and with all kinds of new stuff, but the same trend.
Yeah, in 30 years, it's even hard to even say what it's going to be. You can always it could be like the BYOD revolution running on clusters of iPads, and then you're going to say iPad 30 years from now it's going to be ridiculous. Like iPad, look at that antiquated device.
It's funny. I mean, you think about well, why would we're going to these devices? Why would we ever go back to this distributed computing thing? But at the same time, if you read the articles back, when the PC was evolving to the PC server, and all the FUD that the IBMs and the DECs and everybody put out there, and you read it and it was like, oh, it's ridiculous that anybody would ever run their infrastructure in this x86 stuff, right? And those are toys. And sure enough,
and now look at it.
So
to really, I guess, to kind of wrap up, just gonna kind of redefine truth number 11. Every old idea will be proposed again with a different name, a different presentation, regardless of whether or not it works. So, all right, thanks, Jeff, for taking the time today,
no problem,
and look forward to having more interesting content up here. Thanks a lot.